And with that, I'll pass it over to Tegan Klein, EdgeNode CEO, to kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. Yes, so as many of you know, I was recently appointed EdgeNode's CEO about a little over a month ago now, and I'm honored and excited to empower the team at EdgeNode as well as the broader community. We can go to the next slide. Our mission very much remains the same. I've always worked on long-term strategy within the graph ecosystem, and our long-term strategy has not changed. First, we are making public data available and accessible to all. And secondly, we're here to ensure that the graph network is the future of this decentralized internet that we're all building. And we are very much laser focused on execution around the graph network to make this possible. And so my role is really very much about ensuring the strategy gets executed on in an expeditious way. And that's really what I'm focused on full time. So with this change in my role, I will be handing over the reporting duties for this call to Kyle and Max. You will be in very good hands. They've been collectively in the trenches for over 3 years now. So with that, I will pass it over to Kyle, Director of Global Business at EdgeNode.
Thanks so much, Tegan. I appreciate it. Let me just get synced on these slides. All right, so thanks everyone. Just great to be here. And before going over the progress on the network, I really want to jump in first to go over some major milestones that we've seen in the ecosystem. What's crazy is the graph has officially served over 1 trillion queries. And this is a massive achievement for the entire ecosystem, from the foundation to the core dev teams to all of you in the community, all playing a key part in this. And what's incredible is the graph ecosystem launched the hosted service less than 4 years ago, in 2019. And then we celebrated the milestone of 1 billion queries per month in the summer of 2020. And now the technology is averaging around 1 billion queries every single day. And for context on that, Google, 4 years after launch, was averaging around 200 million queries per day. Again, the graph is averaging around 1 billion per day and has seen many weeks consistently every once in a while, depending on the market and where things are going in activity, where the technology is queried closer to 1.5 to 2 billion queries per day. So the numbers are pretty staggering when you think about it. I'd say one caveat here is that less than 1% of all graph ecosystem query volume has come from the decentralized network. So there's still a lot of very important work to do to get that moved over away from the hosted service. And we'll talk about some big ideas on this later in the presentation. And even when all dApps on the hosted service move over to the network, it won't likely be an equivalent one-to-one volume moving over, since people, when they move over to the network, are already finding innovative ways to decrease volume once they start to pay, and therefore minimize overall costs, which is to be expected. And we'll talk a little more about this as well. Another major milestone for the network is that we saw the 1,000th subgraph published. And the rate at which subgraphs are moving over is just speeding up. And that's probably mostly due to, and the feedback we're getting is, it's mostly due to dApps seeing how much more powerful the network is, with quality of service metrics that are consistently surpassing the hosted service, and they have been now for a year or more. It's important to note that not all subgraphs on the network are used in production yet. There's a little less than 25% of these published and curated on the network used actively for data every day. But many dApps have subgraphs published, curated on the network, and in the process of testing in order to get comfortable, which is always the case and can be expected. Though there are over 43,000 subgraphs on the hosted service, which means that there are many subgraphs already in the graph ecosystem and already using the graph tech and can be upgraded to the network in time. But let's dive into the metrics on how we saw the quarter perform over the network perform over the past quarter. Here's a summary of growth across network subgraphs, indexers and delegators, as well as number of queries and query fees. Though new subgraphs on the network continue to rise fast, the protocol did see a drop in indexers, queries, and query fees. And to just set up some context up front, there are 3 main reasons why query volume and fees went down, which I'll discuss in the next slide. But what's important here is that it's not because people are leaving a network. But let's dive in to understand why. So though growth is never a straight line, it's really important to understand why we're seeing these fluctuations. A 48% drop in query fees is something we take extremely seriously and we dug into heavily. The first thing we saw is that overall Web3 user activity is down across the board, which is understandable and something many of us have seen in the multiple ups and downs in this industry. Still, we couldn't chalk it up to that. We really needed to dive in and understand if this was due to an outflow of dApps moving away from the network. And we actually saw the opposite. We saw only one dApp move away from the network, and it's a dApp that we've been in very close touch with well before upgrading to the network. And we knew they were moving back to the hosted until they optimized their query volume. They were a little worried about cost because they had very high query volume, and then they've adapted, pulling over to hosted just to make sure they minimize it. So the dApp has since optimized their volume, is already planning to move back to the network this quarter. So that will be a great win, a good example or case study of how people have a say. And just to clarify what optimization means for everyone, when subgraphs are on the hosted service, they can and often do query data just constantly, and they haven't had to worry about cost. But as dApps move to the network, they realize they're often overquerying and retrieving data that doesn't always need to be updated every fraction of a second. So they work to make their query volume more efficient, still within the graph ecosystem, just making sure they're only getting and paying for what they need and therefore save on cost. And optimization of query volume is something we're seeing across multiple subgraphs, which is playing a part in the volume and query drops. But the ability to optimize here, it's really important to emphasize it's a feature. It's a feature, not a bug for data consumers. And this alone is making the network an incredibly sticky product. Another important factor in lower query fees was due to a gateway configuration change to reduce parallel or simultaneous requests to multiple indexers for any given subgraph, therefore improving query prices for data consumers actually using the network. And to put that in other words, the price per query has gone down to make sure people aren't paying for more than what they need, making the network more affordable for everyone, which in the end is a good thing. What's really important on the why of the network here is that in Web 2 pricing models across all industries, people are complete price takers. They take it or leave it and have little to no say in what price they pay. On the decentralized network, dApps have some control, and this completely changes the dynamics and creates a data economy where everyone has a say. So we're excited to see people adapt in any way that they can to stay on the network, which is simply the more performant data solution. It's great that the graph network is a sticky product, and these are just a couple examples why. Now, taking a look at the decrease in the number of indexers, this was expected as the MIPS program came to an end in Q2. We assumed that not all would stay on after it ended. Still, MIPS was successful since before the program was announced. There were fewer than 180 indexers, and none of them were able to serve queries on anything other than Ethereum. Now there are over 215 indexers, and many of them are serving data across all chains live on the network. And though we always need to analyze the negatives, we also have to look at the positives that we saw for the quarter as well. So alluding to what I mentioned of the graph network being sticky, when you look back at the beginning of the year, there were only around 140 monthly active data consumers, which is a combination of dApps querying their own subgraphs and then third-party data consumers querying subgraphs they don't maintain. 2 quarters later, this has jumped to 190, so over 30% in 2 quarters. And many dApps use more than just one subgraph, sometimes many more. So it's important to see how many subgraphs are actively queried, just not active data consumers. And so more than 270 subgraphs have more than 1,000 queries per month. But there are a number of subgraphs queried below that amount as well. So the number is right around 300 or so, as opposed to 270 of just actively queried per day. And these data consumers are active across multiple chains live on the network. And I'd say a likely indicator for subsequent growth here is the number of subgraphs being published. So out of those 1,000 plus subgraphs on the network, there is a long list of dApps that I mentioned have published and curated. So now the subgraphs are indexed or are getting indexed and then ready to be queried. And the teams are just getting ready to upgrade, which is something that doesn't happen overnight due to testing that needs to be done beforehand, which is time the team needs to commit to move before moving over fully. And just know the graph ecosystem, the core dev teams and community are in talks with many hundreds of dApps across all chains live on the network, with a large number having already committed to upgrade to the network. And now it's just a matter of capacity for their teams and consistent follow-up by everyone in the graph ecosystem to make sure we make it as easy as possible and ensure everyone has a great experience every step of the way. And I'd say in the end, all this is pointing in the right direction when it comes to data consumers and actively queried subgraphs. And I could say firsthand, and most of the folks on the business team and DevRel, we are seeing a lot of excitement about upgrading to the network across the entire Web3 ecosystem, with many dApps just waiting for the chains they're building to go live on the network, which is something the Graph Foundation and the folks in the ecosystem will be able to unlock soon. And a big reason for this excitement is because, as I mentioned, the decentralized network continues to outpace centralized tech in the most important performance metrics. Aside from unbeatable uptime due to hundreds of indexers being ready to serve queries at any time, median latency continues to get faster. Right now it's 78 milliseconds for Q2. And for some context there, a response time of 100 milliseconds is perceived as instantaneous. So seeing the network below that mark shows how well the network is performing, especially versus the hosted service. And of course, query success rate is also key, as it doesn't matter how fast something's served if it's a failed query. And decentralized network is also outperforming the hosted service there as well. It's proving to the world that decentralized technology is simply the more performant solution, and it has been for a year or more. But performance isn't the only thing that matters. It's also about the experience people have when using the tech. So let's shift gears here, and we'll focus on some user and developer experience improvements, which actually saw some really big advancements in Q2. I'd say one of the most highly anticipated functionalities that recently went into beta is subscriptions. And subscriptions get the graph one step closer to a traditional SaaS experience, while still being able to leverage the decentralized network for just the best performance and unbreakable data. And with subscriptions, data consumers can use USDC to pay monthly and abstract the need to interact with GRT for billing, while everything still gets converted to GRT that gets paid out to network participants. So data consumers no longer need to manually refill their billing, need to worry about it running out and then having to go and log in. And even then, the existing pay-as-you-go billing process is still available. So this just increases developer optionality to customize their experience for what works for them. But with subscriptions, there's also some extremely powerful charting functionality for monitoring queries, as well as the ability to do rate limiting if they're going to give access to their communities, which has been a highly requested feature. And these things weren't available for people using the network before. So subscriptions are still in beta phase, but we've been getting some really great feedback from early adopters and how this is just making their lives easier, which is a big part of what matters. And beyond just enhancing the experience for data consumers, the graph.com landing page got a massive upgrade that's been in the works for many months. And it was a huge cross-team effort across the ecosystem to launch. The website now has simpler to understand wording for both technical and non-technical people alike, which is important to not only get people building, but to onboard participants like delegators in order to scale the network. It has simpler and faster navigation. So one click goes to exactly where you need to be right when you go to the site, getting people learning, building, and participating faster. And it just looks beautiful. I highly recommend you go check it out for yourself. Caroline dropped a link in the chat if you haven't seen the update. And also in Q2, Pablo from the Smart Contracts team gave the first ever public demo of Layer 2 transfer tools at the House of Web3, the EdgeNode House of Web3 in San Francisco. And for those who haven't heard, Layer 2 transfer tools will help the network scale on Arbitrum and make the experience for data consumers, indexers, curators, and delegators faster, better, and cheaper. And this is all leading to a more efficient protocol, decreased cost for participants, subgraphs developers alike, and just a better experience for the overall ecosystem. And then last but not least, new chains continue to go live on the network. There are now 7 chains live being used in production, with Polygon and Phantom being the most recent additions. These 2 chains alone have unblocked thousands of subgraphs with tens of millions in daily query volume on the network. And Optimism's up next and is close to going live as well. And then for future integrations, the Graph Foundation is working on the graph improvement proposal process to speed up integrations, which Eva will discuss in a bit. But these are all very exciting. From even though we see some downside on growth, there is justification. We understand what it is. We're aware of it, and we're working hard to make sure every lever we can pull continues growth, trending up and to the right. But I'll stop here. I'm going to pass the mic back. But first, I'm going to take a couple seconds to give Tegan a proper intro, even if you all know her. And as many as you know, Tegan, like she said, recently took over as CEO. I just really want to give her some shine, even though I'm sure she doesn't want it, which I love about her. But I've seen a lot of leaders in my professional life, from 12 years in the military, 7 years at Goldman, and then quitting Wall Street to join EdgeNode. So one of the best decisions I've made in my life. But I'd say there are leaders with vision, and there are leaders that can execute, and they are rarely the same person. But Tegan has a rare ability to do both, and has been one of the few leaders that I've ever seen with that superpower in probably 2.5 decades across 3 major industries. And I think what sets her apart is like a level of integrity to do what she says, even in the smallest of circumstances. And she's worked harder and done more in just the past 1 to 2 months than anyone will know, to make sure the ship is on the right trajectory, as is moving as fast as possible, and that people are enjoying the ride, which is also important. So sorry about that, Tegan. I'll pass the mic back to you and give you a chance to go over some of the big ideas that you're helping lead forward with the team. You could take it away from there.
Thank you, Kyle. And it's really not at all about me, and very much about the incredible team that we have, not just at EdgeNode, but across the graph ecosystem. So I want to take a moment to look forward at what's to come. But in order to do that, we have to look back. We can go to the next slide. So this is kind of our secret plan that we've been executing on, if you will. McKinsey is famous for their kind of 3 horizons, is what they call them, but we're calling them zones, and you'll see why in a moment. But with that, it's kind of the short term, the medium term, and the long term goal of the business. And so zone 1, it was very much this network infrastructure zone. It was all about kind of building the decentralized network. And Yaniv did a great lift to get us there. Brandon helped execute on that, getting quality service of the Graph's decentralized network on par and better than hosted solutions like the hosted service. That was very much a huge feat. I think we can kind of check this off and view it as done. And we very much needed engineering leaders during this zone. But now we're entering a different phase. And this phase is zone 2. And this is very much the hand-to-hand combat phase. And this is where we are today. And it's really about executing on what's in front of us with the Graph's decentralized network, and really focusing on getting these hosted service subgraphs upgraded to the decentralized network now that the infrastructure is ready. This is obviously a huge hill to climb in zone 2. And once we do that, we can enter zone 3. But zone 2 very much needs great business leaders. And I'm excited to join many great business leaders across the ecosystem, like Kyle, Eva, Martine, Matthew of Streaming Fast, and so many others. And so with that, it's only been a little over a month, and we've already made waves on our progress to the decentralized network and that upgrade. And again, it's really not about me. It's really about empowering the incredible people across the different companies and ecosystem. And so with that, we're very much laser focused on the network. So let's talk a little bit about zone 3 before we move to the next slide. We can stay at the previous slide. So zone 3, this is very much where Yaniv is building. As an example, he's building Geo, a Web3 browser on the graph, kind of playing 3D chess, expanding the graph. It's all about demand generation and data acquisition. And once we at EdgeNode help to complete zone 2, this will free us up to kind of be a new ecosystem participant and ideally join Yaniv in that 3rd zone with data acquisition and kind of further growing the graph. And my goal as CEO is to kind of get us to zone 3 as quickly as possible. I set a 100-day plan. We've been executing on that. And we're very much laser focused on getting that hosted service traffic upgraded to the network. So with that, we can go to the next slide and just talk about our immediate term North Star. So our immediate term North Star is getting that traffic upgraded to the network. As Kyle mentioned, we passed 1 trillion queries and the majority of that is on the hosted service, over 99% actually. And that won't transfer to the network one-to-one. As we have seen, the queries will be optimized, but it really is kind of go time to get that traffic over. And so let's talk a little bit about the hosted service. What is the hosted service? Why does it exist? So once upon a time, there was no way to query a blockchain. Developers were attempting to spin up indexers internally in a centralized way. They had a lot of downtime. They put a lot of engineering hours and costs into this, but it was centralized and a lot of times it wasn't reliable. So it was extremely difficult to query blockchains that existed. And because of this, there weren't really many use cases in the crypto space. So enter the Graphs hosted service. We served indexing and querying for subgraphs. We innovated and coined the term subgraphs, which are open APIs. And we were serving them in a hosted capacity. Though it was permissionless to spin up a subgraph on the hosted service, in the early days, there were only a handful of subgraphs and developers that we were iterating for, like OG builders like LivePeer. And this is really how the graph identified product market fit. So because of this core piece of the tech stack emerging, use cases emerged. So DeFi summer, then NFTs, DAOs, and so much more, right? Web3 kind of exploded in many different directions and it continues to. And, you know, we have to be honest in that we're hosting a lot of that Web3 traffic and usage, which isn't the goal, that isn't the mission. And we've been doing it. We've been subsidizing that for developers and entrepreneurs across the ecosystem. But now that the network is ready, the decentralized network is ready, it's time for those subgraphs to all move over. And we really stuck to our mission on creating a decentralized open data layer for Web3. And we launched the decentralized network 2.5 years ago. And we launched it with one subgraph. And as Kyle mentioned, today there are over 1,000 subgraphs. But back then, you know, this was true innovation. There wasn't anything to fork or copy. The graph was kind of the first of its kind in this category. So if we fast forward to today, we can see that the network very much is flourishing in many different directions with 1,000 subgraphs. Those users are paying for queries in GRT. There are tens of thousands of developers building on and experimenting with the network. And these are really the entrepreneurs building this future that we are just simply enabling. There's also 200 plus indexers that are serving queries. So, you know, these are different companies in different jurisdictions all around the world that are kind of the backbone of the web. If you look at Web 2, it has, you know, one company that's really organizing a lot of the data, and that's Google. And Google, you know, whether they intended it this way or not, they have the ability to alter the data or simply not organize the data that all of us rely on with the traditional web. And, you know, be it internal or external forces, Google is kind of pushed to alter that data or not organize data. And it's not because Google's evil. It's, in my opinion, I think it's actually, that's what happens when you have centralized power and control. Every time it will be corrupted eventually. And so that's why we are working to eliminate the possibility to corrupt that data at the infrastructure layer. And that's what we've done with building the graph network. And so there's also 11,000 delegators. I know many of you on the call are delegating GRT to help secure the network. There's over 2,000 curators, which are kind of signaling to different indexers so that they can organize the data. But now it's time for the remaining tens of thousands of subgraphs to move over to the decentralized network, or upgrade to the network, if you will. The question has really been how to best do that in a very smooth and seamless manner. Think like as easy as upgrading an iOS update on your phone. And that's really been the big question over the past month and a half that I've served as CEO. And what's exciting is that we have a plan. So we can go to the next slide. So we've entered into a new era of the graph, and there are really 3 phases to this master plan, which are shown here. So the sunrise, and this is really how the graph eats all data and how we make sure that Web3 wins through executing on these 3 pillars. The sunrise, this is how we will upgrade all traffic to the network. We have a plan. We've begun executing on a portion of that plan. We're scoping out the remaining engineering work. And then at that point, we will be able to kind of share that master plan with all of you. We've been speaking to community members, large and small dApps, delegators, indexers, kind of fine tuning this plan and the communication strategy around it. And we would love to hear from you. If any of you are curious to the plan around the sunrise, we would love to share that with you and get feedback. The second piece of this is all data services. So this is where the graph goes to all data. We have subgraphs, we have substreams, but there is so much more, and we'll have more to share on this in the weeks to come. And then we have Horizon, and Horizon is the graph V2. So we'll be innovating on all things when it comes to the protocol dynamics, the token economics, more kind of sandbox and experimental compatibility when it comes to the protocol itself. We're working to minimize governance and really kind of simplify things. So we'll have more to share on this in the coming weeks, but I know many of you on this call have asked for simplified token economics, and we really want to deliver on that. So we'll continue chatting to the community to collect feedback and kind of coordinating these comms. And we want to make sure that the best ideas rise to the top. We believe in kind of an idea meritocracy. So if you have good ideas, we want to hear them. And it's really our responsibility to serve you and the other community members. So with that, we can double click into our Q3 priorities if we want to go to the next slide. So this is what we're really kind of excited about in the short term. So the first is solving 4 of the top network blockers. We've actually already solved 2 of the 4 for this quarter. This is really just about smoothing the process and making it easier for developers and entrepreneurs and third-party data queryers to use and leverage the Graph network. And with that, the ones that we've completed are Substreams powered subgraphs on Ethereum on the Graph network. That is live today. And as Kyle mentioned, billing 2.0 with subscriptions in beta. This is something developers have been asking for a long time. So it's been great to execute on that. Polygon went live on the network at the end of last quarter. So that was something that a lot of developers were also asking about, but we're not counting that for this quarter. And it's been nice to just kind of continue making waves and knocking these blockers out. The next is launching the layer 2 transfer tools. So we're very close on this, but that's in scope for the next couple of weeks in the quarter. And then lastly, really just upgrading subgraphs to the network. I know 5 to 10% might seem a bit small, but there's engineering work that's going to allow this pace to pick up towards the end of the quarter and into Q4. So with that, we're very much laser focused. And I will pass it over to Alex, CTO of Streaming Fast, who will discuss the innovations that they've been making when it comes to Firehose and Substreams.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alexander, and I'm going to give you a quick update from the Streaming Fast perspective and our contributions to the ecosystem. You can go to the next slide there. So we've observed from some indexers that by shifting their backend to Firehose in the graph node there, they saw a decrease in their RPC cost by 90%. That's 90. So that was pretty exciting. It was the first integration we did coming into the graph. That's paying here. And we are currently also working with the Go Ethereum team to integrate a new extended tracer that they built in collaboration with our team, and which was inspired by our work on the Firehose. And we're currently porting that tracer to Arbitrum, and that will be helpful for any Geth-based chain. And then we're going to continue rolling out there. But we're also working with a dozen other chains to build a native Firehose integration and make them the graph ready out of the box. And when Firehose is integrated, boom, they also get Substreams support for free. And so a few important milestones regarding Substreams, let's say in the last few months, was the general availability of Substreams in March, and more recently, the release of Substreams-based subgraphs on the network, which means that subgraphs, queryable using the query interface that people are used to, and its current tokenomics and all that, can be powered by Substreams and deployed to the network. So I've personally observed 72 times the performance. So that's 7,200% performance increase on the Uniswap v3 Substreams based subgraph that we wrote, which is an equivalent to the original subgraph one-to-one. And we know some use cases go well beyond that, leveraging the power of parallelization that Substreams bring. And, there's been lots of discussion I'm hearing about Substreams as the new composability layer. People building dashboards or apps, and are exciting to be able to leverage the work of all the community, but at that abstraction layer, a little bit lower down. And the community building Substreams modules, and they're also very interested in piping that data into all sorts of database engines, new indexing technologies. So we're also working to bring those new data use cases, new technologies for indexing within the network. And maybe a last note there, we met with a few large dApps that are getting more and more excited. Some have dug deep into Substreams. Some have started making Substreams their main backend for their data pipelines. And that opening to new technology is received for them as a breath of fresh air, as some reasons why some had dismissed the graph at some point are sort of vanishing, because we're opening up the valve of new data service, as Tegan was saying. So that's been our work this time, and we had a lot of fun. To you there.
All right, let's pass it on to Eva from the foundation.
Thank you so much. You go to the next slide. Cool. Yeah. So I'll catch up everyone on the R&D efforts and some of the wider ecosystem work with the foundation. So you might have remembered last quarter, there was a few different things on this roadmap because we've shipped them. So, those being Substreams powered subgraphs, some of the billing features. Looking forward to this quarter and the next, we're really focused on scaling. So we've got some final improvements to make on Scalar, our efficient payment system, currently being audited. As Tegan mentioned, we're also working on L2 migration in full swing. So we have a few GIPs like L2 transfer tools to actually help indexers move over to the Arbitrum network. And then we'll be moving over all query volume. We've got a lot going on the research side. So making these data services verifiable. And when I say data services, I mean subgraphs, substreams, and also future new data services that the graph will be serving as we really solidify our role as a marketplace of data. We'll also be adding new data sources. So things like Arweave, IPFS, even off-chain data, increasing the scope of what the graph can actually index, and then also integrating that with Substreams directly for efficient querying. We're continuing multi-chain expansion. I'll speak a bit more about that on the next slide. And we've got a ton of RFPs. So we're really looking to grow the Substream ecosystem. If you know any Rust developers, whether it's an independent developer, a dev shop, or a team that just needs data themselves, we're giving out grants to anyone who wants to help build Substreams, learn about Substreams, and grow the ecosystem here. And lastly, we do have a new roadmap that we'll be releasing very soon. So look out for that over the next month. So as Kyle, I believe, mentioned, we finished MIPS. And if you remember, MIPS was a multi-chain incentive program similar to an incentivized testnet for indexers. With that program, over the last 9 months, we launched 7 new chains. So really excited about the force behind the Web3 community as every chains community came together. We're seeing a lot of node operators, let's say in the Gnosis ecosystem, become an indexer and really create synergies between both. So that's part of our growth strategy going forward, is really capitalizing on all the existing node operators for these chains. As a next step, we are finishing things up with optimism, and then we'll be moving to a permissionless process. And this means that for the first time in history, any chain that wants to be supported by the graph can do so by their own volition. So really exciting moment. This means that folks can post on the forum, they can go through the testing process, make sure their chain is up to snuff, and then work with the core dev teams, and then their chain will be on the network. So really exciting time. As we know, especially in the bear market, there's quite a few new chains coming up. And this also means things like L3s, new types of L2, so not necessarily new L1 chains, but really making sure we support all types of data being indexed. Next slide. And wanted to circle back to the biggest milestone of the last quarter, as Alex touched upon. The real impact of Substreams powered subgraphs is the amount of developer time and resources that teams save. So, something like the Uniswap subgraph going from 2 months of syncing because it was so large and complex, there's so much data, it's the most highly used smart contract on Ethereum, to 20 hours really shows what the power of the graph is as we start to scale Web3 itself. So really excited to see dApps actually even transition in the way that they're thinking about data now that we know the graph is so performant. Next slide. And really to summarize, what Substream powered subgraphs do is they are boosting the power of subgraphs. So we wanted to just share a little snippet of some of our internal stats on the documentation. So Substream powered subgraphs were launched the 3rd week of July. And in that first 10 days or so, we already saw nearly 100, I believe over nearly 200 actually users actually visit and start building substreams. We had, I believe, over 20 new substreams that were actually built and deployed within the first 5 days. So really exciting that people are catching up. Our biggest hurdle right now and where we could use your help is actually spreading the word and educating more developers. We know Rust engineers are sparse, but any that you know of, we'd love to get them on board. And wanted to wrap this up with the GIPs that are in process. So World of Data Services, that's GIP 42 is ongoing as we're continuing to work on adding new data services. So you'll see more this year. Query fee rebates is one of the GIPs to make things a lot more efficient for indexers. So we're really thinking about how to make sure profitability for indexers is taken into account. L2 indexing rewards, there's a lot going on here, but this is the migration of the rewards from L1 to L2. So the end state is that indexers can earn 100% of their indexing rewards on L2, the new Arbitrum launch. But for now, we're doing this incrementally to make sure that things are secure and also indexers feel comfortable with the process. And lastly, we are establishing a trust minimized payment system between our gateways with the timeline aggregation protocol. And this should really scale the ability for the network to serve more queries as we have more gateways as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eva. I'll take it back over to close things out before questions. Just to give some well-deserved thank yous to people that have helped in all sorts of ways across the ecosystem. Thank you so much to Jeff from Chapter 1 for connecting us with an amazing head of talent, to Jenna from CoinFund for including the ecosystem's open roles in their hot jobs feature, to Shiliang from Ledger Prime for the hiring suggestions, JR from Multicoin for all the amazing help on comm strategy, and Michael and Craig from Reciprocal, thank you so much for all the incredible strategy support, as well as Ali from the team for the hiring recommendations, to John Choi for help on strategy in Korea. And of course, last but not least, thank you to all the amazing Graph Guardians for what you do every single day and really just helping educate the world on the Graph network and then helping it build out to the next level. And then to close it out, we want to make sure everyone knows how you can help. So first, we'd really appreciate your feedback on the Sunrise plan that Tegan mentioned, as well as comm strategy. So please reach out if you'd like to hear more about it and give feedback. Next, we ask all of you to delegate your GRT to help continue to scale and secure the decentralized network. Every GRT delegated helps increase the ability of indexers to sync up and serve more queries to data consumers on the decentralized network. Third, we are hiring from some key roles in the ecosystem. If any of you know amazing product managers, business developers, engineers with heavy experience in things like Rust, UI design, smart contracts, or just excellent subgraph developers, please send them our way, or even just let us know so we can chase. We're always looking for the best talent and just send them our way. And if you know anyone that could be a fit. And then for anyone that has portfolio companies in San Francisco or even very close friends who you know are aligned, please pass them our way so we can make sure we try to get them access to the Edge of Node House of Web3, which has now a solid number of founders, builders, and more attending the space daily. Please invite your community to be a Graph advocate, whether they've been in the industry for a while or are new and just want to break into Web3. It's been a really good red pill for getting people into the Graph ecosystem, and from Graph advocates, they've even become full-time hires. So it's a great way to get involved. And as always, reach out with your advice, feedback, and anything else you think we can benefit from. We take feedback very seriously and can work really fast to incorporate it. So please keep it coming, and we appreciate any and all of it. So that's it for now. I'll pass it over to Caroline to go over any questions that have come up within the call.
Thanks, Kyle. A couple questions to get through. The first one is, with the network volume going down in Q2, have you seen the same amount of volume ups and downs on the hosted service?
I could probably take that one. So Web3 usage has gone down across the board. There was a good drop commensurate on the hosted service as well as the network. So it's not like the hosted service is going up while the network is going down. Like I mentioned in the beginning, there's about 1 billion queries per day right now on hosted, but we have seen up to 1.5 to 2 billion. So it could just be activity across all chains in the ecosystem across the board.
Next question. How has the energy level and morale been across the team / community during and through the transition of Tegan to CEO?
Yeah, I'd love to take that one if that's okay. I'm sure others would have some feelings. I'd say people feel excited and unblocked and are energized. The team is hyper focused. We've cut, and obviously I'm experiencing this personally, we've cut so much of other responsibilities, and now it's all about the North Star. It's all about our near-term goals. And that's what we should be concentrating on. So the unblocking of the team, getting into the momentum swing around executing. I think Tegan and other team members have done a really good job of helping rework what has been some in the past, some complex internal engineering plans with the team to really make the Sunrise simpler, easier to execute on, faster upgrades, and so on. Maybe some other folks would want to chime in as well, though.
Yeah, happy to chime in. Hi, everybody. I'm Rodrigo Coelho, Chief Spirit Officer at EdgeNode. So I will add an echo to what Kyle said here. Just to give some more color on this, we do an internal quarterly survey amongst all of our team members on engagement. So we ask about 12 questions, and they're rated on a scale, and people are able to add comments, and we ask questions along certain parameters like well-being, leadership, responsibilities, psychological safety, et cetera. So we're in the midst of a survey now. It ends on Friday. So we have about half of people, respondents of their responses in. So what I can say is that we are up across the board. We are able to compare quarter to quarter, and we track these over time so we can see how things are trending. And what I can say so far is that across multiple dimensions, primarily around leadership, responsibilities, and role clarity, our scores are up dramatically. So that's something we're going to be closing out this week and then showing to the team at our next all hands. But happy to report that our scores are really doing well over this last quarter.
Maybe next one, Caroline.
Next question is, how and where can we learn more about the Sunrise?
Yeah, I'd say that we will share more public information on this soon. But if you're interested, let's just book a call. Let's talk through it, walk through it, and get direct feedback. I think that'd be the best way until everything's made fully public and we're building out in the open, which we want to be.
Next question, is this data marketplace supply or demand constrained at the moment?
I can take that one. So that's a great question. I would say it's a bit nuanced because we're in the process of building out this data marketplace. So obviously we have subgraphs as the product right now. We have that demand on both the hosted service and the network. We also have that supply actually being able to serve those queries in that data. But our goal really is to make the graph much more modular. So not only core developers today can add new data services, but anybody can. So there are a few new data services we're already working on, things like Substreams powered subgraphs. Next, we'll be focusing on getting Substreams and Firehose on the network, even getting new data services on the network. You'll hear more about that soon. And really the goal is at that point, then it's about getting the current Web2 volume that exists, right? Like there are people requesting things like, fire hose or raw blockchain data outside of the graph. And so it's just shifting that current existing demand to the graph network. In terms of the supply, once these data services are deployed, meaning it's either the core devs or maybe some other, developer in the future that deploys these, it's just getting indexers to actually run the backend stack. And that will largely be based on Firehose and the existing graph node infrastructure. So for indexers, it will become a choice of economics of perhaps loyalty to the chain or the type of data community. Maybe they only want to serve data scientists, for example. But we're really confident that because what we're building out is just implementations in a decentralized fashion for demand that already exists. But our tech is stronger, it's efficient. We've got things like Firehose and Substreams powering it. It'll be there once we actually launch it on the network.
This question was asked in the chat from Jenna. Are you planning an integration with Matter Labs on ZK-Sync?
Yeah, ZK-Sync is currently live on the hosted. We'd supported them in testnet and we're live, I think, first or second day of mainnet. And we are in discussions with them. They're really excited about unlocking substreams for builders. So we're talking through a Firehose integration now. And that's exciting because the builders across all chains, not just CKsync, are asking the chains to get substreams unlocked. So it's a really fun thing to see and work through with all the different ecosystems.
And then this question was also asked by Jenna in the chat. Where will we see the team in person for the rest of the year? So it looks like you will find the team throughout several upcoming events. SBC coming up at the end of August, DevConnect Istanbul, ETH India, Masari Mainnet, and the Marfa House in Texas hosted by Art Blocks.
I will also add, we will be doing our typical birthdays at the end of December. So if you are interested in co-hosting or supporting one, please let us know before we start diving into that planning.
Those are all the questions that came through, but if anyone has any other questions, we can take them now.
We can call that a wrap. Thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Reach out for feedback. We look forward to having many async conversations with you on different calls. We're always available and we always want to chat. So really appreciate you popping on the call and look forward to hear your feedback on everything.
Thank you.